everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic back again to talk about another wrestling pay-per-view, this time AEW. Revolution is in the air, and that means we need to talk about lots of very interesting matches indeed, especially that 1 hour Iron Man match between Bryan Danielson and the AEW World Champion MJF. So strap yourselves in because this is what happened at AEW Revolution 2023. Let's go. The first match on the pre-show is the Lucha Bros and Mark Briscoe versus Tony Nese, Daivari, and Josh Woods in 6-man tag team action. And this one had a lot for a pre-show match. Like, loads of stuff happened. Sterling got involved. There's lads flying all over the place. Phoenix at one point stops a pinfall by grabbing the referee's arm. That's not fair. Towards the end, Sterling distracts the referee while Mark Briscoe gets hit with the clipboard, I think it was Sterling's clipboard, but he kicks out anyway to a huge pop from the crowd, and then shortly thereafter, Mark gets the win for his team. After the match, Alex Abrahantes throws Sterling into the ring to take a package piledriver from Penta, and that's pretty much all she wrote. And with that, we move on to the main portion of the card. The opening match of the night is Chris Jericho versus Ricky Starks. The stipulation here is that the members of the Jericho Appreciation Society are all banned from ringside, and there is heat between the two men with a big, intense start to the match. But then it settles down into I don't want to say like a standard match, because it's obviously good and it's between two very talented wrestlers, but maybe a standard formula. Jericho on top and Ricky fighting back and trying to make that big babyface comeback. At one stage, Starks tries to hit the spear, but Jericho reverses into a code breaker, but then Starks gets the spear later on for a nice near fall. Both guys grab each other's heads and do like an intense stare at each other, and then Jericho gets the walls locked in, but it gets reversed into a single leg Boston Crab from Starks. At this point, Sammy Guevara comes down and is taken out by Action Andretti out of nowhere, and they brawl off up the ramp, but I understand it's a nice crowd popping moment and everything, but what was the point of the stipulation then if Sammy was just going to come down anyway? I didn't quite understand. While the referee's distracted by this, Jericho hits a gut shot with the baseball bat behind the referee's back, but then Starks blocks the Judas Effect elbow. Commentary make a big deal out of this, saying this might be the first time it's ever happened, and shortly thereafter, Starks gets the Rochambeau and defeats Chris Jericho, clean as a whistle, for the second time. The next match is the final burial match between Christian Cage and Jungle Boy Jack Perry, to give his full name that they now use. This one's deeply personal, of course, and Jungle Boy starts off intense. So intense, in fact, that Christian runs away into the crowd, but Jungle Boy chases him and hits him with someone's beer. Christian does not want to go anywhere near that casket at the top of the ramp yet, so he keeps things in the ring and uses some nasty heelish tactics, including standing on Jungle Boy's hair and pulling him upwards. Oh, it looks very painful. Jungle Boy is also wrestling nastier than usual too, though, and busts Christian open with a headbutt and bashes his head against the ring steps and all that sort of stuff. Christian then whips Jungle Boy with his belt. They head up to the top of the ramp where the casket is, and Christian opens the casket and has planted a couple of chairs inside earlier that day. He goes to hit the kill switch onto one of the chairs, but Jungle Boy just shoves him off the stage. It's an effective counter, and then hits a big dive. Back up near the casket they go, and Jungle Boy is ready to finish Christian off, but Christian hits a low blow and puts him in the casket, but Jungle Boy bravely fights against him shutting the lid. Christian then goes really old school with a handful of dirt in the eyes, then hits the kill switch and goes for the concerto, but Jungle Boy avoids it and they try and choke each other out with a shovel. Jungle Boy then uses the shovel to apply the snare trap, chokes Christian out, hits maybe the stiffest looking concerto I've ever seen, and puts Christian in the casket. Then, after a long pause, Jungle Boy slams the lid and the casket just drops. Like, I can't emphasize enough how quickly the casket disappears from view. I think it was planned because, I think some smoke came up out of the hole as well, but it looked almost unintentionally comical, at least to me and the guys editing this video. So we all had a good laugh. But hooray, Jungle Boy won. Next up, the trios title match between the Elite, Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks, and the House of Black, Malakai Black, Brody King, and Buddy Matthews. Kenny and Buddy start the match off, but then Malakai Black tags himself in, and the crowd are already very hyped. There are "This Is Awesome" chants before Kenny and Malakai have even done any moves to each other yet. They have a nice exchange, which Malakai gets the better of and then does his like cross-legged taunt thing, and Kenny's all like, oh no, he's really good. It all breaks down into a big old brawl, which the Elite come out on top of with some signature offense, but then Brody King kicks out of a 450 splash at the count of 1. Kenny and Brody go back and forth for a while before it all breaks down again, with everyone hitting big moves and super kicks and knees, and obviously the crowd are just loving it. It's really exciting action. Kenny and Malakai decide to have a knee off. They both knee each other lots of times and both kind of lose. They're both down. Brody then does the sleeper off the apron on Nick Jackson, but Matt saves his brother with what else? A big super kick. Kenny is then distracted by Julia Hart on the apron. Malakai tries to take advantage of it, but ends up accidentally kneeing her in the face. Kenny is then isolated as Black looks to finish him off, but the Young Bucks save the day. They hit the BTE trigger on him, but Buddy Matthews breaks up the pinfall. From there, the Bucks go for the Melter driver, but Matthews reverses this with a knee to the face on the 450 bit of the move. You know what I mean. Then they chain a few finishing moves together and win the Trios titles. The Young Bucks are no longer the Trios champions. It's the House of Black. They celebrate. There's a kid in the ring. It must be one of the wrestlers' kids. He's got a mask on as well. And then the lights go off and then they come back on too soon. And we see the House of Black just leaving like normal people, not mystical demons. Kayfabe is dead. Next up, the triple threat match for the Women's Championship. Ruby Soho and Saraya taking on the champion, Jamie Hayter. The story here is, of course, that Ruby is caught between the two groups. Whose side is she going to take? But she starts off the match strong, taking out both opponents with a big leaping drop kick off the apron and lands hard on her own back. It looks nasty, but she's okay to continue. They all brawl in the crowd and then back in the ring. The action seems to be split quite evenly 3 ways, with nobody gaining a full advantage. At one point, Jamie Hayter hits a double suplex, showing off her strength. Ruby hits a Saito suplex on Saraya, which at first I was quite terrified by, given Saraya's history of neck injuries, but it's hit well enough. Then Saraya starts slapping both opponents and then shouts stop at them both and then goes, ah, and then they both beat her down. I don't know what the point of that was. Saraya gets her submission locked in, but it gets broken up. Tony then helps her out on the outside with a distraction, Tony Storm that is, but then Britt Baker distracts the referee to stop Saraya getting a pinfall on Jamie Hayter after hitting her DDT move. It used to be called the Rampage. I can't remember its current name. Ruby avoids a big lariat from Jamie Hayter, which takes Saraya out of the match totally. It's down to Ruby and Jamie Hayter. They have a back and forth exchange of roll-ups and pinning predicaments and all that sort of stuff. Eventually, Jamie gets one, and it wins the match for her. 1, 2, 3. Jamie Hayter is still the AEW Women's Champion. But the action isn't over yet. Saraya and Tony Storm beat down Jamie Hayter and Britt Baker afterwards, but then Ruby Soho throws them out of the ring. She's a valiant babyface after all, and she says, "You don't love this place. This is our home." And Jamie Hayter raises her hand, and then Ruby Soho takes out Jamie Hayter and Britt Baker. It was a trick all along. It was a ruse. The heels get in the ring and spray the big L's on Jamie and Britt, and they raise Ruby's hand. And then a really happy theme music, Ruby, 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 Soho, which isn't entirely, it felt a bit thematically off, but I thought the swerve was done well, and I actually didn't see it coming. I thought she'd chosen the good side, but actually she's a heel now. Now, what follows is possibly the most graphic match I've ever seen in a major promotion on pay-per-view, I think. We've already used the black and white filter in this video once or twice, I think. We're going to have to use it a whole lot more. It's time for the Texas Death Match between Hangman Adam Page and Jon Moxley. Oh, my word. Hangman comes out to the Outlaws version of Ghost Riders in the Sky. It's a new theme. I don't know if it's just for this match or if it's going to be his normal theme going forwards. But Hangman's theme, I think, was one of the more distinct AEW themes. So I don't know. I mean, it's a cool song. I just don't know if I agree with the change. He attacks Moxley during Moxley's entrance, and Moxley is busted open very early on with barbed wire, obviously. He then gets a fork out of his boot and just, like, carves Hangman's head open with it, and I was watching it like, what? It looks real. I think they really just did that. I think. Oh, man, it looks brutal either way. There's more barbed wire stuff, including Hangman running headfirst into a barbed wire wrapped chair. He then goes for a powerbomb on Moxley onto 2 chairs, back to back on like the top bit of the chairs. But thankfully he actually misses and Moxley only gets powerbombed onto the flat part of the chair, which I'm sure still absolutely sucked. Hangman wraps barbed wire around himself and hits a big moonsault to the outside. Did the barbed wire really add much there, Hangman? I don't know. Moxley gets back into it with an RKO out of nowhere. Just a big cutter, yeah. He puts Hangman's head in between two bricks. Puts his hand in between two bricks and stomps the hand. The head would have been a bit insane. Moxley then no-sells a back suplex but gets hit with a big lariat. He ends up on the old barbed wire board on the outside, but as the camera zooms in, he's laughing despite being shoved into barbed wire because he's just a crazy guy. At one point, the two of them trade, honestly, the stiffest back rakes I've ever seen. And then, obviously, there's a barbed wire back rake as well. Hangman at one point gets absolutely chucked off the top rope as well. A terrifying bump onto the barbed wire board on the outside. Then he gets up before the count of 10, and I remember the actual rules of this match, which I'd forgotten about for large periods of it. A lariat forces Hangman again to beat the count, but he's all fired up and hits a big lariat of his own. Then goes for the buckshot, but Moxley reverses it into the Death Rider, and then curb stomps Hangman onto a brick, and again Hangman beats the count. Moxley then chokes him out with a sleeper hold, and again Hangman breaks the count, then drags Moxley towards him with a chain and hits another lariat. He then hits him with a brick, goes for the buckshot, and hits the buckshot while Moxley's flipping him off. It's like they thought, what are all the most badass things we can do? And just all chuck it into the same match. Hangman then hits one final lariat and then hangs Moxley with the chain because he's the hangman over the top rope, and Moxley taps out and ends an utter war of a match. It was scary at points. So after all that, I kind of feel sorry for the guys in the next match, which is the TNT Championship match, Wardlow versus Samoa Joe. Just having to follow a match which had all of the violence and all of the spots. And the crowd are understandably a bit quieter for this one after the big bloody war we've just seen, but it still starts off fast. Joe hits his always impressive dive to the outside. Wardlow hits his, it's kind of like a whisper in the wind, isn't it? Like his twisting dive from the top back into the ring. He's got freakish agility for a man of his size. What feels like quite early on, Wardlow hits the F10 and goes up top. Huge swanton bomb, and Joe kicks out. Joe then gets the clutch locked in not long after that, and Wardlow fades, but he's a brave babyface, remember, and he manages to hang on. Of course he does. Wardlow hits a powerbomb out of the corner and goes for another, but Joe counters with a big lariat. We maybe have seen enough lariats on this show now, but it's okay. He goes for a powerbomb of his own, but Wardlow hits a headbutt and locks in the clutch, or maybe a sleeper hold at least. And while commentary are kind of going, he's got the submissions aren't really his forte, but he's got the sleeper locked in really, just chokes Joe out like Joe's gone. And Wardlow is the new TNT champion. A finish that took, I certainly wasn't expecting Wardlow to get the submission victory, and it even seemed to take the commentary team by surprise as well. Difficult spot for this match to be in, but I think they did okay. After the match, we see in a skybox watching on Powerhouse Hobbs, who is, of course, the number one contender to the TNT title. He's got his brass ring with him, and he's looking mean. The next match, and the penultimate match of the night, is the tag team title match, with the Guns defending against not only the Acclaimed, but also the team of Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal, and the team of Orange Cassidy and Danhausen, who are dressed in matching gear. That's nice. The two heel teams are clearly planning to work together before the bell at ringside, and the opening portion of this match is kind of a comedy exchange between Jeff Jarrett and Orange Cassidy, with Cassidy outwitting the veteran and then hitting backdrops on everybody with his hands in his pockets. Sonjay Dutt gets involved, so the Acclaim hit him with Scissor Me Timbers. What a name for a move that is. And then the Acclaim do a big old scissor celebration, but the Guns beat them down from behind to big heat. All the heels team up on Bowens and do a big synchronized strut in celebration, and the crowd are not happy about that. But then Max Caster gets the hot tag and runs wild for a bit. He also mimes, I like this bit, he mimes pulling down the straps, despite not wearing any straps. Lethal and Jarrett take control, but the Guns betray them, breaking their alliance, only for big Satnam Singh to throw them out of the ring. Danhausen then gets in and stares down Satnam. He goes to curse him, but Sonjay Dutt stops him from doing so. Satnam then grabs Danhausen, but gets hit with a Superman punch from Cassidy and a Faymaster from Daddy Ass himself, Billy Gunn. The Guns get back in and hit a double low blow to their own father, and then Caster hits the mic drop to Austin Gunn, but Colton Gunn tackles Bowens onto the pinfall attempt to break it up. Jarrett tries to hit a guitar shot on Max Caster, but Caster gets the guitar off him, goes to do it himself, but Aubrey stops him. Why Aubrey? There's been like a million broken rules in this match already. Lethal then hits a shot with the Golden Globe that they stole from that actor. He was in Cobra Kai. I liked him in that. That's all I've seen him in. Behind the referee's back. Why did he wait for the ref's back to be turned? All the rules are being broken anyway. It doesn't matter. But Max Caster kicks out and Jarrett is shocked. Jarrett then gets into a shoving match with the referee, ends up on the outside of the ring, and in the ring, Danhausen starts to run wild, but he gets hit with the Gunns' double team finisher, and they retain those belts. Afterwards, the champions are interviewed in the ring by Renee, but here come FTR to a huge reaction. They beat down the Gunns, hit a spike pile driver to one, the big rig to the other, and then pick up those belts and look at them for a bit, but then leave them on the apron. And at some point in the skirmish, Dax got busted open as well, so that looked pretty nasty. But yeah, really exciting to see FTR back. Surely they will become those tag team champions. And finally, the main event, the 60-minute Iron Man match for the AEW World title between the champion, MJF, and the challenger, Bryan Danielson. Bryan's entrance is, I think, normal, but MJF gets a gothic masquerade string section to play his theme. Ooh, and he comes out with his devil mask thing on, and he's all very evil. This one understandably has quite a slow start, with MJF keeping up with Danielson for a bit and then realizing, oh, I'm in over my head here, running away into the crowd, taking a breather, and throwing a drink at a child. Oh, that's not very nice at all, MJF. He also looks into the camera and says, oh no, is this going to cost me a star, Dave? A little shot at Meltzer there while he's stalling on the outside. He then takes control of the match for an extended period, but can't get the first fall until eventually Danielson works his way back into things with a big sunset bomb out the corner. MJF, though, catches Bryan trying to skin the cat at one point into the ring and hits him with a super kick before posing like Shawn Michaels. MJF then quite uncharacteristically goes for a springboard moonsault to the outside, but Danielson avoids it and MJF jams his knee upon landing. Back in the ring, they then go into a long, very long exchange of pinfall attempts, back and forwards, almost old kind of British wrestling style, rolling around the ring. Neither man able to get a 3 count. Then they take each other down with clotheslines and are almost both down for a double 10 count. But Bryan gets up first, blasts MJF with the running knee, and goes 1 fall ahead. Bryan then goes for a second knee attempt, but MJF collapses and avoids it, more by luck, I guess, than skill. Or is he just playing possum? Because when Bryan goes to pick him up, MJF hits a low blow for a DQ, so Bryan is 2 falls ahead. But then MJF immediately rolls him up for 3, it's 2-1. Then pins him again straight away, it's 2-2. 2 pins in a row from just a low blow. I'm not sure what I think about that. On the whole, I was a big fan of this match. I thought it was really good. But that bit, I have to maybe question. Anyway, the scores are tied up. It's 2-2, and MJF is now really selling how tired he is on the outside. And we're not, I don't think at this stage we were even halfway through. I think we're about maybe 25 minutes in. He goes to the outside and is drinking water and trying to take breaks. He then gets into a brawl with Bryan on the outside. Bryan wins the brawl, gets them back in the ring, and starts working over MJF's leg. Bryan puts on a figure 4 leg lock. MJF slaps him in the face to try and get him to break it and tells Bryan that he hates him, so Bryan just slaps him back. MJF does make the ropes, but Bryan keeps the hold applied a little bit longer than he has to, and he's laughing now. He's enjoying himself. Back to the outside they go, and MJF puts Bryan on the timekeeper's table, then goes up to the top rope, shakily, slowly. The commentary team are selling how this isn't MJF's usual style. He doesn't do this. And even though he doesn't usually do this, he then hits a really thrilling elbow drop from the top rope all the way to the outside through the timekeeper's table. Bryan almost gets counted out after this, but just makes it back in time. MJF, though, takes him back outside and hits a jumping tombstone into the wreckage of the table. It busts Bryan open, and MJF then follows that up with the Heat Seeker and goes 3-2 ahead. MJF tells Bryan that he flipping sucks and that he himself, MJF, is the best in the world. And then he grabs Bryan's bloodied head and says, like, oh, say hi to your kids at home. Really healing it up again here. He then tells Bryan to give him his best shot, and Bryan does with a huge slap, and then shortly afterwards hits a running knee off the apron, then goes up top and hits a diving headbutt which busts MJF open massively. Like, he's bleeding loads. Bryan hits the running knee and the label lock ties it up at 3 falls apiece. Then we get a long exchange and a very dramatic exchange of submissions in the middle of the ring. And Bryan gets caught in the armbar. He reaches for the ropes with his free hand, but MJF locks that up as well, a bit like Zack Sabre Jr. So Bryan stretches out a boot and just gets the bottom rope. Back and forth they go with headbutts and big strikes. MJF hits another heat seeker, this time just for 2. Then he heads up top with Bryan and hits a tombstone off the middle rope, but again he hurts his knee, so he can't make an immediate pinfall. He takes so long, in fact, to make the cover that Bryan is able to reverse into a single leg crab on the injured leg with just 1 minute of the match remaining. MJF hangs on, and eventually the time runs out, and MJF taps, but it's already too late. The match is announced as a draw. The fans do not like this. They are chanting bull crap. The refs get in and doctors, they're applying oxygen to MJF. Bryan's fired up. He wants to keep going, and the crowd definitely agree with him. Luckily then, on commentary, Tony Schiavone receives word from the back that Tony Khan has decided this won't end in a draw, and we are heading to sudden death. Both get near falls at the start of sudden death with roll-ups. MJF then thinks about using the belt, but the referee takes it off him and says, no, you can't, you'll get DQ'd, you'll lose the belt. But as the ref turns away, MJF sneakily puts on the Dynamite Diamond ring and goes to hit Bryan. Bryan avoids it though and hits a Poison Rana, then the running knee again, but MJF kicks out. He puts on that single leg Boston Crab once more, but MJF just about makes the ropes. He rolls to the outside of the ring, and when Bryan reaches over to get him, he hits him with that oxygen tank that was being used on him, on MJF, in the break between the normal 60 minutes and sudden death. Bryan is out cold, the ref didn't see it, MJF rolls back in, applies the label lock to a passed out Bryan, who wakes up just in time before he's about to get, counted out of the match, or before he's ruled as unconscious, I guess, by the referee. But he wakes up, he struggles, he fights, and then he taps out, and MJF wins or retains the AEW World Championship. This was an epic war of a match. It was very long, but I think it lived up to the hype. However, MJF did have to cheat to beat Bryan, despite saying, oh, I'm actually the best in the world. But then, why am I surprised? It's MJF. It's very much what he does. But what did you think of the match, and what did you think of the entire show? Do let me know in that comments section down below. And thank you very much for watching this video as well. Thank you to Joel and Luke for editing it, and just, God, thank you to wrestling. What an eventful show it was. And stay safe out there, stay positive, and I'll see you very soon.